You are looking at a campus in East Tennessee that is changing the world through science. Don't believe me? Let me run you down what Oak Ridge National Lab is working on at this very moment. Advanced materials science, biology, environmental science, energy technologies, nuclear science, engineering, isotopes, and national security research, all happening in our backyard with about 6,500 employees. We welcome you to Inside Tennessee. I'm John Becker, your moderator, and we welcome the new director of Oak Ridge National Lab, Dr. Stephen Streiffer. Great to have you with us. You've been in that post since October, and we're glad to have a chance to sit down and talk with you this morning.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm going to introduce our panel, then we'll get to questions. Susan Richardson-Williams is a Republican, and she runs her own PR firm.
Good morning, John.
Don Bosch is a Democrat, runs his own law firm.
Good morning, and neither Susan or I are scientists.
We are testing the limits here. We've done it before.
It's a stretch, but we're going to do our best, folks.
Well, let's start with your top priority. You're in this job since October. What right now should our viewers know is happening at ORNL?
So if you look at the world right now, there are a number of intertwined problems I think really are just existential for humanity, really big things that are facing us. Clean energy, climate, sustainability, national security, economic security, all these things are really intertangled. And ORNL works on all those. So the things that really excite me as I come in to work every day, what we're doing in energy, what we're doing in computing in particular, these are things that just change the world, and we hope to be at the forefront, and we hope to stay at the forefront.
And for our viewers who don't have a lot of familiarity with ORNL, can you talk about some of the things we've already seen with the lab and what has changed because of it?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that we're really proud of right now is we have the world's fastest supercomputer on site. This is a machine called Frontier. It's about 1 million times more powerful than an iPhone. And that in itself is amazing because an iPhone is about 1 million times more powerful than the computers on the Apollo mission, just to tell you how far we've come. And the computing is great. What's really exciting is what you can do with that. So we can actually simulate the entirety of a nuclear reactor now, the computing power that we have at our fingertips. And if you start to think about what that means, that's amazing. If you look at trying to design a reactor, license a reactor, and a lot of times you're building something, you're taking experiments for 15 years, trying to figure out how that works. Being able to do a simulation in a few weeks, a few months, rather than 15 years of hardcore experiments, that's amazing. That really changes the game.
So, Dr. Streiffer, for our viewers, and even for Susan and I to some degree, lots of people now think they're nuclear specialists after seeing Oppenheimer. And I'm curious to what the relationship is between ORNL and Y12, the operation that built the nuclear weapons and now is maintaining and powering down nuclear materials for safety purposes. But what's that relationship between ORNL and Y12?
So they came out of the same DNA, the same history, of course, but we're really separate operations now. We have some collaborations. One of the great things that we have at ORNL is something called the high flux isotope reactor. One of the things we do with that is we actually do research on isotopes that cure cancer, try to develop new therapies. We work with Y12 on the fuel for that reactor. There are a few other projects like that, but we're really separate entities.
So you really have nothing to do, to speak up, with weapons technology.
Correct.
That is the Y12 component.
That's the Y12 component.
Right.
Correct.
And so we're talking about energy. If you could expand on that a little bit. Everybody, again, thinks of nuclear energy when they think of ORNL, or many people do. What other sources is ORNL really working on, particularly with the advent of the supercomputer? We've sat here with just about every director of ORNL over the years, and it's always really interesting. And I think before it was the Jaguar, and then the Chinese eclipsed us, and now we're back. So it's a race. But tell us what you're doing in other energy sources.
Absolutely, and it's a good point. I didn't check the news this morning to make sure we're still the fastest supercomputer. It changes that quickly. I think a great example of other work that we're doing in energy, if you look at other types of energy that you might produce from solar or wind, the real bottleneck with that right now is not the production of the energy through the solar panels or the wind turbines. It's really how do you take that energy and make it available when you need it, not when, for instance, the wind blows. And one of the ways that we do that is through large batteries that we can hook to the grid. Batteries are a very relatively immature technology relative to a lot of what we think about in either the nuclear industry or even with gas and coal. and trying to get those to the point where they have the performance characteristics and the cost characteristics that actually make it affordable. That's something else we work quite hard on.
Would it be fair to, it's synonymous sort of with the electric car, where when we saw the first electric cars, they were very expensive, the batteries were expensive, and now they've become smaller and more reasonable. Is that a fair analogy in what you're going through with battery technology? Absolutely,
and another important point there is the way that you build a battery for an electric vehicle is different than you build a battery to support the utility grid. So if you think of the battery that goes into a car, one of the real things you're worried about there is the weight and volume of that battery, because of course you got to haul it around in your car. Right. If you're making a battery for the electric grid, you, within some reasonable parameters, can have as much space and as much weight as you want to do that, as long as it supplies the power for the amount of time you need it under the temperature outside that you need it. So it's really a different type of battery. We've worked a lot on the batteries for electric vehicles. I think that's really come along a long way. We've got a lot to do for electric storage for the grid. It's just a different type of technology.
Does the marketplace help that when you have an Elon Musk who's pushing the limits in that world?
Absolutely. He's been great at being an early adopter and getting out in front, and I think generating excitement around the technology. And that's one of the reasons, one of the things you always get into is that game of who's going to blink first. Are we going to come up with the battery technology? Well, if we need the battery technology, then there have to be manufacturers who are willing to make the electric vehicles. But the electric vehicle manufacturers are just sitting back there going, well, they're going to be the battery manufacturers that are going to support us. So the fact that Elon Musk was willing to make that move, start the company, and push the technology has been huge. That really is a great example.
We've got to take a quick break. Susan, we'll get you in right after this short break on Inside Tennessee. Again, the director of ORNL, our guest this morning on Inside Tennessee.